So everyone, thanks for tuning in. And today I want to talk about the 10 things that I think you and your business should know when we move into phase two of the reopening of the Singapore economy. Now we've had the circuit breaker, and then we've had phase one. And now I don't know about you, but when the news was announced that we were going into phase two this Friday, my first reaction was, wait a minute, I did not expect phase two to begin so quickly. And the next thing that came to my mind was, okay, so what are the rules that are going to apply when we move into phase two? And I started digging, and as usual, you know what it's like. The rules are changing fast and furious, and they are all over the place. So what I've done is I've tried to pull together what I think are the most important points for everyone to take note of. So let's get started, okay? I got 10 points today. The 10th point, okay, and we start from the top. The 10th point is, first of all, social gatherings are now allowed. And that's a big deal. Because previously, we were only allowed to have gatherings amongst family members. And even then, we all know that there were restrictions on how many people could visit one household at any time. But now, you don't have to be family to meet each other, to hang out. And that's a big deal, especially for those of us who are without family in Singapore or to whom their friends are their family. But of course, this is Singapore, so there are always going to be restrictions on these social gatherings. Now, the first big gathering is this. You can only have groups gathering of up to 5 people. Okay? But on the other hand, you have MOH announcing that households can receive up to 5 people. So those who are good at math will immediately wonder, okay, if I can have up to 5 people visiting a household, what if what if there's even just one person in the household? Automatically, that's 6 people, right? Which is more than 5 people. Now, the interesting thing is, if you look at the MOH advisories, they don't seem to say that you can only have fewer people visit a household based on how many people are in that household at that time. So, I mean, I don't want to sound like I am suggesting that this is a loophole, but I think the reality is that if you have 5 people visiting a household, you are going to end up having more than 5 people at that household at that one time, and that is allowed. Okay, but there's another problem. Okay, so what MOH has announced is that by default, we will need to maintain safe distancing of at least 1 meter at all times. And if it is not feasible to maintain this 1 meter distance, then you need to maintain 1 meter between different groups. But that's the question. What do you mean by not feasible? Because strictly speaking, if you really take MOH's advisories at face value, this means that even within any household, you will need to respect the safe distancing at all times. Which means I have got to be 1 meter away from my wife at all times. I've got to be 1 meter away from my daughter at all times. Surely that can't be the case, right? But if you look at the way the advisory is drafted, it doesn't explicitly say that obviously we are going to live the 1 meter rule for those within the same household. So that's a bit weird, okay? And then the next question is this. What do you mean by you don't have to respect the 1 meter distance if it's not feasible? If I have a lot of people in my house, does it mean that it is not feasible to respect the 1 meter distance? What if I go for dinner at a restaurant and it's a very small restaurant? Can I maintain that 1 meter distance? Okay, let's talk about it. Because the next point I want to talk about, point number 9, is this. We are now allowed to eat outside. We don't have to pack our food back home anymore. And again, that's a big deal, right? Because for many of us who don't cook, we would have had the challenge of having to rush out, to pack lunch, to come back, to eat our lunch, to clean up, and then get back to work. So at least this will give us more flexibility. But one thing is this. You would have to expect that there are going to be massive queues everywhere. Because what the advisory says for F&B outlets, and F&B business owners take note, all right? Within a group of maximum 5, you don't have to maintain that 1 meter distancing. So if you're running a restaurant, for example, and you want to mark out your tables, you are allowed to have a table of 5 people, and you don't have to worry about maintaining a 1 meter distance between the people at that table. But you must have a 1 meter distance between every table and the next table or the next group. You can use bar counters, for example, but again, you need to maintain that 1 meter distance between every individual group. So this is what I mean when I say it's not really clear what not feasible means. Because effectively, since we are allowed to dine out and sit less than 1 meter next to the people who have decided to join us for a meal, well, realistically, the 1 meter distancing is not going to be respected a lot of times. And I think, let's put it this way, I think the government is really expecting us to do the right thing. I think they recognize that it is impossible to literally force everyone to stay 1 meter away from each other at the same time. And so they're putting out the 1 meter guidance as an underlying principle. That's something that we should be respecting as much as possible. But they recognize that it's going to be impossible to comply with this completely. Okay, let's talk about other things we need to take note of when we go back to eating out. Okay, so first of all, I don't know about you, but whenever I want to get ice cream, I always stand at the counter and ask to sample different flavors before I choose which flavor I want. Okay, that's not going to be allowed. Okay, we are not allowed to sample food at F&B outlets. Okay, so no sampling allowed. Okay, another one, and I think some people are going to be very disappointed by this. The advisory says that we are not allowed to have self-service buffets. Okay, in other words, if you talk about your really solid hotel buffets, for example, where you have the food all lined up there and you go there and you help yourself, that's not going to be allowed. And let's say you cater for your little home event at home, okay, which is allowed within the rules. So when you order catering, normally the catering will come in different trays, right? And then you help yourself from each of the individual trays. So that's not going to be allowed as well. The catering has got to come in individual packets. Okay, so I know a lot of you will be very unhappy upon hearing this news, but there is one bright side to all this. I looked very carefully at the advisory, and the advisory said that you can't have self-service buffets. What this means is, if you are a restaurant owner who provides a la carte buffet, or you are a food lover who loves to go for a la carte buffets, I think that is allowed actually under the rules, because the rules specifically refer to self-service buffets with common areas, common utensils, common dishes for everyone in the restaurant to take from. Okay, so for the restaurants who are running a la carte buffets, this is your business opportunity if you want to get more traction in the buffet market, okay, without worrying about the competition who is not equipped to do a la carte buffets. Okay, there are a few more restrictions, okay, on eating out. Okay, so I don't know about you, but for all the football fans out there, we all know that the EPL is back, and what a lot of us do is we go out and go to a place with a TV screen and we sit there and we catch a match with our friends. Sorry, that's not going to be allowed, because under the rules, F&B establishments are not allowed to have live entertainment, and that includes the live broadcast of football or sporting events. So that's not going to be allowed. F&B establishments are also not allowed to have live music, unfortunately. So if you're the kind who likes to go to a place like Timber, for example, have a meal, have a bite, take in some live music, that's not going to happen as well. And since I talk about having a meal and live music, normally you get a pint of beer or a bottle of wine, right? Okay, you can do that. Okay, that's the good news. The bad news is no alcohol after 10:30 p.m. Okay, presumably this is to discourage people from lingering outside for too long, but you can't continue the gathering at the F&B outlet. You are going to have to move to someone's house, for example. Okay, so that was number 9. We can eat out, but with all these restrictions. Okay, number 8. Number 8 is a quick, simple, but important point. When you go out, please bring your IC. Or you can bring your driver's license, your passion card. So for the full list of identity cards you can bring out, go and look at the requirements for safe entry, okay, on the government websites. Now, why do I say this? Now, what most malls are doing is they have implemented a QR code system where you can scan the QR code on your phone, and it brings you to a website, and then you can check in on the website. Okay? The problem is this. My own experience has been that not every mall has this system. Some malls still require you to physically scan your IC or your driving license or whatnot. Okay, for the NSS, don't worry, they can scan your 11B as well. Okay, so do take note, it will be such a waste if you leave your house and then you are turned away at the entrance to the mall because you don't have your IC and they don't have the QR code system. Okay, so that's point number 8. Point number 7, okay, I want to go back to something that we're talking about just now, which is I was talking about having a drink at a restaurant. Now, point number 7 is this. Unfortunately, entertainment venues are still closed. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that your bars are still closed. It means that what MOH calls nightclubs are still closed. I mean, no one really calls them nightclubs. We're talking about clubs, right? They're still closed. So you still can't go to Zouk or Butter Factory or wherever it is that people go these days. I don't know, I'm not cool. You can't go to karaoke outlets. Okay, so your Teo Heng, your K-Box, I don't even know if K-Box is still around. Those are still not allowed to be open. You still can't watch a movie. The cinemas are still closed. For the arts lovers, the theaters are still closed. Okay, even libraries and museums are still not open. I know that some of us don't think that these things are entertainment. I think museums are great, but unfortunately they are still closed. Which actually I am personally a bit annoyed about, because if you think about it, how often do you go to a museum that's crowded? Okay, don't talk about those short-term events. Like we had an event some time ago at the National Gallery, which was very popular with folks who wanted some great shots for the Instagram. Okay, but putting those events aside, I mean, most of the time, it's quite roomy in a museum, right? But, I mean, that's the decision that the government has made, all right? Okay, so you also have your indoor and outdoor attractions, which are still closed. For example, what we know is that Science Centre is still going to be closed. And we know that various attractions at Sentosa are still going to be closed. For those of you with kids, unfortunately, Kidzania has just announced that they are closing shop. But I imagine that they are counted under the attractions that are still closed as well. Okay, I suspect, although I have not been able to confirm this, that Universal Studios will continue to be closed as well. Okay, so unfortunately, you still don't have these outlets for fun. And there's another thing. So, you know, whenever you go to stores or malls, okay, sometimes for the larger ones, there are play areas. I'll give you an example. If you go to IKEA, you've got what they call Smallen, you know, that play area where you can draw for kids. That's not allowed to open. If you talk about the water play area, if you go to the upstairs of Vivo City, there's this water play area, this huge outdoor playground. I think that's still closed, okay? And one more thing that's still closed, okay, for those of us who are living in condominiums, and I'll come to more to condominiums later, all right? But barbecue pits in particular in condominiums are also closed, and this is based on the BCA advisory for condominiums. But the strange thing is, if your condominium happens to have a sauna, the BCA advisory says that saunas can open. So you can't have a barbecue with just 5 people in the open air with safe distancing, but you can go to a sauna. I leave it to you to decide whether this makes sense, all right? That's point number 5, okay? You've got all these entertainment venues that are still closed. Okay, so, sorry, that was point number 7, not point number 5. Okay, so counting down. So we've covered 10, 9, 8, and 7 already, okay? So since we can't go for all these entertainment venues and options, so what, for many of us, what will be available will be sports. So that's point number 6. Sports facilities will reopen. And this is for both public and private sports facilities. And when I say private, it includes your country clubs, it includes your condominiums. Okay, but as usual, there are some restrictions. So there is an advisory from Sports SG. And if you are thinking about going for any particular sport, I would advise you to go to the Sports SG website to check out the advisory. And if you are a business owner who provides facilities for a specific sport, please check out the advisory. Okay, and if you want to talk about it, look for me, because it's really important that you comply with the advisory. So let's talk about the big picture requirements first, all right? So what Sports SG has said is that your sports facilities can only admit one person per 10 square meters, up to a maximum of 50 people. Okay, so we take a simple explanation, or sorry, a simple example. Suppose you're running a gym. Okay, then you've got to figure out exactly how many square meters your gym is. Okay, and then you are going to have to count one person per square meter, and that's the maximum that you're allowed to have. And if you're running a huge gym, like some of the big CBD gyms, you are still limited to a maximum of 50 people, 50. Okay, so we're talking about gyms, right? So let's talk about a specific situation. So let's say you are living in a condo, and some condos have small gyms, right? I don't know about you, but some of these gyms, they are less than 10 square meters. Okay, so does it mean that you can only have one person? Seems like it. But what if you have more than one person from the same household who want to use a gym? If you think about it, the logic is you are living in the same household anyway. So why shouldn't you be allowed to exercise together in the same gym area, as long as you're all from the same household? So based on the Sports SG advisory, you would think that you can only have one person in the gym at any one time, full stop. However, the good news is that there is a BCA advisory for condominiums that states that individuals from the same household can use a facility together. Okay, so if you are in a condo with a gym, you can use the gym together. That appears to be the effect of the BCA advisory. Okay, so let's say you manage to make your way into a sports facility. Okay, so how do you manage the crowd and the flow of people within the sports facility? And this one applies not just to the users of sports facilities, but also those of us who actually run or operate sports facilities. Okay, so remember I mentioned earlier that the general rule is that you have to have 1 meter safe distancing between individuals. Now it's going to be different for sports. For sports, you need a distancing of 2 meters in general. So that's the starting point. If you're inside a gym, for example, it doesn't matter whether you're doing cardio or weights. You've got to have a 2 meter distance. And in particular for gyms, BCA has come up with an advisory that gym equipment needs to be, sorry, not BCA, Sports SG has the advisory that says that sports equipment needs to be at least, gym equipment needs to be at least 2 meters apart. Okay, so if you think about it, your commercial gyms, you've got all your treadmills, for example, which are all in one line. And I know what some gyms are experimenting with is putting up like transparent shields between the different treadmills. That's not going to be allowed. The gym owners will need to physically shift the machines such that they are 2 meters away from each other. Okay, but it gets even worse, because if you are having an indoors high intensity or movement class, then instead of 2 meters, it's got to be 3 meters. Okay, so what is the indoor high intensity movement class? If you have your HITT class, for example, okay, you're conducting classes, if you're conducting spin classes, for example, and come on, if you think about spin classes, the exercise bikes are definitely less than 2 meters next to each other, okay? I'm sorry, they will have to be shifted, okay? You will need to have at least 3 meters between each of the participants, okay? So, and I mean, since we're talking about gyms, okay, the BCA, the Sports SG advisory also says that you can spot. So if you're a trainer and you want to spot your clients, you can do that, but you have to spot with safe distancing. And I mean, come on. I mean, how are you going to spot someone safely if you have to maintain a 2 meter distance away from them? Because remember, within a sports facility, it's minimum 2 meters. I mean, if my trainer is going to spot me 2 meters away, he or she is going to have to rush over if something happens, right? Again, I'm not sure, okay, guys. I'm really not sure. Okay, but again, all I can do is tell you what the rules are. Okay, so we were talking about classes, right? So remember I mentioned earlier that for any groups, for any social gathering, you are limited to 5 people per group. So the same 5-person per group rule also applies to classes. So if you want to have your yoga classes, for example, if you want to have your dance classes, for example, you are limited to 5 participants in the class, but the good news is that the 5 participants does not include the instructor. So you can have 5 plus 1. So if you're an instructor, if you're conducting classes, you are allowed to take on 5 students at one time, not 4 students. That's the good news. Let's say you are using a shared space to conduct your classes. Okay, you can use the shared space, but you need to maintain at least a 3-meter distance between the different groups. Okay, but again, if you ask me, okay, this is a bit weird because we just established that you need to have 3 meters distance between all the participants for a sports class. So if you need to have another 3-meter distance with other groups having the same class, this means there isn't really a clear distinction where one group starts and one group ends, right? So again, I'm not so sure how feasible this is in practice and how it's going to work out. Okay, but again, that's the rule. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about going to the gym. Okay, personally, I hate going to the gym. Okay, it's just not my thing. Okay, I'd rather play sports. So when you talk about having to maintain safe distancing, okay, the automatic question that arises is this: are you allowed to play contact sports? And the answer, according to Sports SG, is yes, you can play contact sports with modification to avoid extensive body contact. So in other words, you can play sports, but you have to play them in a different way. You cannot have extensive body contact. Okay, so look, let's be realistic. There are some sports for which I really don't think it's possible to play without extensive body contact. Okay, I mean, for example, for the judokas among us, it's not even possible to do judo if you don't have randori, correct? I mean, how do you even practice your throws? It's not possible. And even if you move away from the martial arts sphere, we talk about something like basketball. I mean, how are you going to play basketball without extensive body contact? You're going to be rubbing your sweaty bodies up against each other as you run, as you shoot, as you block. I mean, that's the reality, right? What about football? I mean, okay, so first of all, you probably can't play a proper game of football because remember, you can only have 5 people in a group. So unless you can find a way to play football with 2.5 versus 2.5, I don't think that's going to work. Okay, so again, I'm really not sure how this is going to work out in practice. Okay, to make things even more complicated, okay, according to Sports SG, there are some sports in particular which are definitely allowed. And these sports, according to Sports SG, will be football. So even though football does involve body contact, we can play football. Okay, fine. Basketball. Okay, basketball is fine, according to Sports SG. Handball is okay. Netball is okay. Futsal is okay. Ultimate, the frisbee, is also okay. Touch rugby is okay. Paintball is also okay. So it seems like the general rule is that you can have contact sports, but you must play them in such a way to avoid extensive body contact. But all these sports are definitely allowed. But to make things even more complicated, I just mentioned that according to Sports SG, paintball is allowed. But on the other hand, you have a Straits Times article from 3 years ago saying that paintball game centers remain closed. So I'm not sure if there's a consistency there. If I am running a paintball center, I'll be very annoyed if Sports SG tells me that paintball is allowed, but there is this other article from Straits Times telling me that I'm not allowed to operate, and I don't even know what is the source or basis for this statement from the Straits Times. Okay, so I mentioned paintball, right? So there is another sport which is controversial. Okay, so if you talk about cue sports, when I say cue sports, I'm talking about paint, I'm talking about billiard. Okay, so according to Sports SG, these sports are allowed. But again, in the same Straits Times article, it says that billiard halls are to remain closed. Again, this doesn't make sense to me, especially when you think about it. Cue sports are pretty non-contact, but again, that's the rule. Okay, the final sport I want to highlight, okay, is cycling. Okay, so we all know that it's common to cycle together. So again, because of the new rules, you can't have more than 5 people cycling together. And Sports SG has made it clear that if you are not the front rider, okay, you cannot be less than 3 meters behind the front rider's slipstream. So if you think about it, you can't be more than 3 meters, you can't be less than 3 meters away from each other left and right, because cycling is strenuous, right? And you can't be 3 meters behind someone. So the reality is, you can't really cycle together. Let's be realistic about it. Because if you try to cycle with this kind of distance between you, you are going to, at best, get honked by angry drivers, and at worst, I don't want to go there. Okay, so I don't think cycling in a group is going to be realistic under these guidelines from Sports SG. Okay, so I've talked a lot about specific sports. Okay, there are some other guidelines that apply to all sports. Okay, so first up, you are supposed to be wearing a mask as a default, even if you're wearing a sport, but you can take off the mask for a strenuous activity. So I think for this, let's try to be realistic about it. If you really need to be breathing hard, okay, then please, your health comes first, and you shouldn't be masking up at the detriment of your health. At that point, you're not supposed to be sharing equipment. Okay, I think that one is quite obvious. But there are some places where it is impossible not to share equipment. For example, if you're in the gym, you need to share the weights, right? So the principle from Sports SG is that you are supposed to be cleaning and disinfecting the equipment regularly. That being said, whether it is realistic or not to disinfect, for example, free weights immediately after one person has used it, I don't know. Okay, the gyms will have to find a way to manage this. And there are a lot of requirements for those who are operating sports facilities. Okay, so they will need to appoint a safe management officer. In other words, they'll need to arrow someone to be in charge of this. Okay, someone to be the responsible person for this. And all the sports facilities will need to implement contact tracing. They need to implement safe entry. They need to do temperature screening for the folks who come in. They need to have a crowd management plan. They can't have long queues. They need to have cleaning protocols. They need to have the place well ventilated. Okay, and there's one other thing. What the operators of sports facilities will need to do is they will need to submit to GoBiz the number of workers that they have on site, and they also need to submit their safe management plan. Okay, but the strange thing is they don't have to submit these things before they start operating. They only need to submit these things within 2 weeks of opening, which is a bit odd, right? Because I'm sure that most of the facility owners out there will be responsible and want to implement all these things before they go live. But they don't have to report to the authorities until 2 weeks later. So I guess this is good for getting business off the ground. But I'm not so sure whether this is the best practice from a supervisory point of view. But again, to be fair, I think the businesses are all struggling, and the faster they can open, the better. But most importantly, okay, my last point, okay, for this point number 6 is, regardless of the sport you want to do, please go to the Sports SG website and check out the advisory for the specific sport you want to undertake to see what are the do's and don'ts, and try your very best to comply with the advisory, because it's there to protect not just you but everyone. Okay, half time. So we have covered points 10 to 6. Okay, I see that there are a bunch of questions. Let's deal with some questions for now. Okay, so Fergus asks, in theory, when you're eating out, you can have a group of 15 in 3 cars, and you sit at 3 different tables in a restaurant with 1 meter between the 3 tables. Answer, yes, of course you can do that. And yes, I expect many groups to do this. And yes, that would be within the rules, because there's nothing in the rules that say that one table cannot talk to another table which is 1 meter away. Okay, so yes, the reality is that I agree there is a lot of leeway for things to go back to normal. And I really wonder whether this whole thing about maintaining 1 meter safe distancing at all times is more of a motherhood statement. It's more of an in principle thing, right? That the government is hoping that we keep in mind even as we try to go about our daily lives. Okay. Terrence asked a question: should hotels be open? I actually don't know. Okay, because I've looked up the advisories, and I don't know whether staycations, for example, are going to be allowed. I think it's fairly clear that your hotel restaurants can reopen. Okay, I think it's fairly clear that your hotel bars cannot reopen. Okay, but whether or not you can have a staycation, I am not sure. Okay, and I know that there are some people out there who are dying for a staycation. You know who you are. I've talked to you about it. Hopefully there is more clarity on this sooner. Okay, Ben Smith tells us that the new SingPass is an EIC feature. That's great. I didn't even know about that. Okay, I will check it out. Okay, and I suppose the point remains that either bring out a physical IC or figure out how to access your EIC on your SingPass. Okay. Um, Henry asked the question, touch rugby, how to play without no body contact? I have no idea. Okay, because the whole point of touch rugby is to touch someone, right? Um, but again, we have the Sports SG advisory telling us that you can play touch rugby. So I guess maybe you can touch and then let go quickly or something. I'm really not sure. Okay, but anyway, the other difficulty in playing touch rugby is, remember, you can't have a group of more than 5 people playing at one time. So I don't play touch rugby. Okay, maybe you all can tell me whether it's possible to play touch rugby with 2.5 people on each team. Okay, I leave it to you to tell me. Okay, we're halfway through. Let's continue. So we've covered points 10 to 6. Okay, to recap, point number 10 was that social gatherings are now allowed. Point number 9 was that eating out is now allowed. Point number 8, bring your IC everywhere. Point number 7, most entertainment venues are still closed. Point number 6, sports facilities will reopen, but with lots of restrictions. Okay, so let's go on. So we're talking about sports. And I know that for many people, how they look is very important to their mental well-being. So the good news is that beauty services can resume. Now, we all know that in phase 1, we are already allowed to visit the hairdresser, and not just for a basic cut and wash, but to have hair treatment and whatnot. Okay, so that's great. Okay, but beyond that, other services, other beauty services, like for example, your aesthetics clinics, your facials, your pedicure, your manicure, all of this can resume as well. Okay, so that's the good news. But as usual, there are going to be restrictions. Okay, so first of all, let's take a basic example. If you want to go for a facial, surely you can't wear your mask and have a facial, right? So the answer is yes, you don't have to wear a mask when going for a facial, but, and this is the challenge for the beauty salon or the beauty spa, okay? They will need to disinfect the premises before and after. Okay, so it's going to be a lot harder. Okay, let's be straightforward about it. Because as a customer, you are going to have to wait longer because of this lag time between each customer. And for the aesthetics, for your beauty salons, your beauty spas, your staff will need to do a lot more cleaning. Okay, you can't run away from that. But apart from facials, okay, you will still need to wear masks. Okay, what about when you're cutting hair? Surely you can't wear a mask and cut hair at the same time. I mean, how do you get the fiddly parts behind your ears? Okay, I couldn't find any advisory on this, but my own personal experience when I go to cut my hair is that when my hair is being cut, I still have to keep the mask on, but my poor hairdresser will have to sort of like fiddle around, remove the loop, cut behind my ear, and then put the loop back on. It's definitely more challenging. Okay, but the mask unfortunately still has to remain on. So one of the principles that we try to maintain, right, is not too much crowding, right? So the advisory is that your beauty salons, your beauty spas are supposed to encourage customers to do bookings before they come, make appointments, and have some kind of queue management system. Okay, and one other advisory is that you should only have one therapist per customer, as opposed to reduce the risk of cross-spreading. Okay, which actually leads me to one question. Okay, so when you go to cut your hair, normally you have one person washing your hair and one person cutting your hair, right? Normally there is a dedicated hair washer. Can the hair washer and the person cutting your hair be the same, different people, or does it have to be the same person? I don't know the answer. Okay, I really don't know. I couldn't find anything in the advisories. Okay, and I'm hoping for some clarity on it. I'm hoping it's allowed, because if it's not allowed, I'm not going to name names, but whoever I go to cut my hair may not be 100% compliant. But like I said, there's no advisory I could find on this. Okay, but going back to the same theme, which is try not to spread too much, try not to share too many things. So your hair salons, your beauty salons, they are not supposed to give you food. So you normally get some tea when you go and cut your hair. That's not allowed anymore. And you're not supposed to have shared items like magazines. I mean, I don't know about you, but for a lot of guys, when you go to the salon, that's your chance to indulge in the guilty pleasure of reading some trashy magazines. That's not going to be allowed, unfortunately. You have to play with your phone while getting your hair cut. Now, for the beauty salons that apply products to you, and maybe they have a common pot of products or a common jar of products they apply, no double dipping is allowed. Okay, so it's just like when you eat chips with friends and you're not supposed to dip the same chip into the jar or dip twice, right? So same principle. Okay, no double dipping allowed. And if you talk about your folks who are operating nail salons, who are wearing aprons, they need to remove the aprons before going for their breaks, and they need to disinfect the aprons. And speaking of disinfecting, the common areas that people touch, for example, if you're doing a manicure and you have a hand rest there, okay, the salons and spas will need to cover these areas with towels and disposable covers, and they need to be replaced after every customer. And for your pedicures, the foot basins and the chairs need to be disinfected after every customer. So again, I'm sorry, it's really going to be a huge pain to comply with all these, but again, these are the rules. Okay, so we have talked a lot about point number 5, okay, which is about beauty services. So let's move on to point number 4. So I know a lot of you are wondering, okay, what about work from home arrangements? Is there going to be a change to that when we move into phase 2? Now, the answer is very clear. Work from home continues to be the default position. It continues to be the default arrangement. In other words, if you have been working from home, you are supposed to continue working from home. And folks, I am serious about this, okay? MOM is not messing around when it comes to this. Our understanding from various contacts and clients has been that MOM has been quite diligent in doing random spot checking at workplaces. They will literally ask employees what they are doing and confirm that what they are doing is an essential task that cannot be done from home. In other words, if as an employer, you want your employees to come into the office because you think that they are more efficient in the office, or you think that you want to keep an eye on that, I don't think MOM is going to accept that. If MOM does a spot check and asks the employee what they're doing, and it turns out that the employee can actually be doing the same task at home. Okay, so this is quite serious. I know that for a lot of employers, there is a desire to get employees back into the office for better efficiency purposes. But really, think long and hard or get advice on whether it is something that cannot be carried out effectively in the office, so it cannot be carried out effectively at home, such that the employee has to come into the office. Okay, so we talk about work from home for adults. Okay, what about children? And that brings us to point number 3. Okay, and unfortunately for all the students out there, tuition classes and enrichment classes can resume. Now, I know that for many of you, you wouldn't have been getting a break anyway because of all the e-learning that's going on, but you are going to, well, what's happened, this is more for the business owners who run tuition or enrichment centers. Your face-to-face classes can resume. If you are a coach or instructor who does home visits, your home-based classes can resume. So that's the good news for you. But for your tuition centers or for your enrichment classes, okay, insofar that you're conducting classes, okay, you need to have reduced class sizes, okay, and the classes need to be rescheduled such that the different classes don't interact with each other. Let me give a concrete example. You can't have a class ending at 1:30 and the next class starting at 1:35, because in that 5 minutes, the two groups of students are definitely going to interact with each other. So you need to have a longer lag time, okay, and coupled with the fact that you are going to reduce class sizes, I know this is going to affect the economics of the industry. I know it's going to affect the economics of the business. It's not easy, okay, and I know it's going to continue to be tough times, okay. That's the unfortunate reality. But there is unfortunately one specific kind of enrichment class which cannot resume, and that kind of class is singing classes or voice lessons. In other words, if you are in a habit of taking singing classes or you teach singing classes, I am very sorry, but you are not allowed to have these classes resume. And I suspect the reason for that is because the studies seem to suggest that when you sing or you talk loudly, the droplets will spread more readily. So unfortunately, for those of you in this industry, you will have to wait a bit longer. Okay, so that was point number 3. Let's go back down to point number 2. Okay, and I have saved the almost best for the almost last. We know that besides eating, the other great Singaporean pastime is shopping. So the good news is that shopping can resume, but you are going to have to expect super long queues. Okay. Now the funny thing is, even before we move into phase 2, even from phase 1 onwards, we've already been allowed to go to malls. It's just that the only reason you go to a mall is to pack your food because the retail is not really open yet. Okay, so retail is now allowed to be open. Okay, and that is a big deal for your malls. It's a big deal for your SMEs who operate retail chains, retail outlets. Okay, but the reason why I say you should expect long queues is because there are going to be all these restrictions on your shopping experience. So first of all, you are going to have occupancy limits. You can't have a free for all inside your shop. You are going to need to limit it. Now, as to the numbers, I will leave it to. So again, we have the same principle that you are allowed to have one shopper per 10 square meters. But for the shops that are small, there is no need to enforce this. Rather, as long as you can maintain the 1 meter distancing between shoppers, then you're allowed to let the shoppers in. But again, let's be realistic. This is really, really hard to enforce. Because even if you are allowed to let people in, there's nothing to stop people from bunching up inside your shop if there is a particular popular item there that everyone is trying to get their hands on. So again, I think as shop owners, you have to exercise common sense. But the advisories do say that if you see a group of more than 5 people, you should break them up. How you're going to do it, I don't know, but you need to train your staff to do so. Okay. Now, there are more requirements for business owners. Again, the same theme is that you will need to do more frequent cleaning, especially of your common touch points. For example, your iPad systems, if there's, well, we are not allowed to put up samples, remember I mentioned that, okay? So there are no samples, but you need to have a more rigorous cleaning regime. You need to implement safe entry as well. You need to, this is big, I know that now that we're moving into phase 2, a lot of retailers would have a lot of stock that they're trying to clear. Unfortunately, retailers are not allowed to have discounts or sales for the next 2 weeks at least. And I think the rationale is to try and avoid more crowds from gathering. But again, that is going to make it more difficult to clear the stock. Okay. In terms of the crowd control, retailers will also need to draw queue lines. So nowadays, if you go to your supermarket, for example, you have all these lines on the ground telling you where to stand in the queue. For those who are reopening now, your retailers, your small shops, you need to draw these queue lines also. And of course, the queue lines need to reflect a 1 meter distancing. For the retailers who are in the clothing business, okay, there's actually one very difficult requirement to meet, okay, which is, according to the advisories for retailers, fitting rooms or changing rooms where your customers try on clothes for sizing and all that, they need to be disinfected after every use. And on top of that, retailers are supposed to discourage trying and testing, and they need to sanitize the items that are tried or tested after they're tested. So, I mean, this is tough, okay? Because supposing I go into a shop, okay, and I want to try on a pair of pants. So what this effectively means is I take this pair of pants, I go into the fitting room, I try the pants, I come out. I hand the pants to a shop assistant. Okay, so first of all, that pair of pants cannot be tried by anyone else already. You need to chuck it in a corner, clean it, disinfect it, and then maybe only the next day, then that piece is ready for trying. And then in between, after I step out the changing room, before the next customer goes into the changing room, someone needs to go in there and clean and disinfect the changing room. Hand on heart, I'm really not sure if that's practical. Okay, so again, this is a challenge that the clothing retailers are going to be facing. Now, another difficulty for retailers, okay, is they will need to inform customers of all these measures. So they need to put up signage, they need to instruct or educate their service staff how to inform customers about all these things. And I suspect that a lot of SMEs and retailers don't realize that they have the obligation to tell their customers about these things. They just assume that everyone will just have to follow, but unfortunately there's this obligation, okay? So it's going to be really hard to do business. Okay, so far I've been talking a lot about shops, okay? So a lot of shops are located inside your shopping malls, okay? So again, like I mentioned just now, you have your occupancy limits in your shopping malls. So for many of you who have been going to malls to buy food, for example, You have someone at the entrance keeping track of how many people are going to the mall and stopping you from entering if the limit is exceeded. That's going to continue. Okay. Now, there are some malls that try to bring in shoppers with events and activities. Okay, a classic example, if you go to Ngee City, where Takashimaya is, at the basement, the atrium area, there is always some fair or some event going on. Well, that's not going to be allowed for the foreseeable future. You're not allowed to conduct activities or events in these open areas. Now, some malls also have common play areas for children. I mentioned earlier, for example, the water play area upstairs of Vivo City. So those are not allowed to be open as well. Okay. What about, for example, dedicated play facilities? For example, there are some malls where you have play facilities where you can pay a fee and throw your kid there for a couple of hours while you shop to your heart's content. Okay, I couldn't find a specific advisory on these dedicated play facilities, but I think they are also closed as well because they are considered indoor attractions. Okay, and the last thing is I was talking about malls, turning to department stores. So I mentioned that you can't have events in malls. Unfortunately, you can't have events in your department stores as well. You can't have events in your bookshops, for example. You can't have signings. You can't have Q&A with an author. In other words, in general, you just can't have events, unfortunately. So for those of you who are in the SME sphere, for those of you retailers, you need to find some other way to get your customers in, your eyeballs in. Running promotions is not going to be allowed. So that was point number 2. Okay, I've got one last point number 1, and after that, let's do a bit more Q&A. And the final, most important point I feel is this: be safe. Okay, think about it. Okay, we've had months now of the circuit breaker and phase 1. We've spent billions from the reserves, and I don't even know how long it's going to take for these billions to be replenished from the reserves or into the reserves. You have all your SMEs who have folded because of the circuit breaker period, especially all your F&B outlets. And every outlet that goes up, that's potentially someone's dream, right? Someone's livelihood just gone. You've got all your employees who have lost their jobs because their employers are not able to keep them on, even with the job support scheme. And you have all the folks who have suffered mentally and emotionally because of the lack of human contact. Not everyone is lucky enough to live with someone that they can interact with and gain some measure of relief from that. And for some people, they are unlucky enough to live in a space that is not a safe space, and they find that it is suffocating living with whoever they're living with, and the proximity is just too much for them to take. And I think the reality is that in this period, all of us have paid some price for another. For parents, it is the difficulty of trying to juggle work from home with caring for children at the same time. For the elderly, it is the difficulty of not seeing our friends, our loved ones, our family, except for short fleeting moments when people come to drop off food or check on our well-being. Especially for the elderly folks who live in care facilities. I mean, up until phase 2, no visiting to care facilities was allowed at all. Again, I mean, the point I'm really making is that it's really been a tough time for everyone on the individual level, as well as across the board and the whole economy. Now, the fact that we are moving into phase 2, it doesn't mean that we are out of the woods. It doesn't mean that we are clear. It doesn't mean that we're safe. The reality is that the virus still exists in the community. We know that the virus can spread even amongst people who have no symptoms. And if we look at an example like New Zealand, for example, they can go from virus-free to not in just a matter of days. And the reality is that we are not opening up because we're safe. We're opening up because the economy cannot take it anymore. We're opening up for livelihoods, and we are hoping and praying that lives are not sacrificed rather lives are not sacrificed because of this. So think about it. Okay, say you meet some friends. Okay, you meet 4 friends for dinner and drinks because it's been so long, right? And of course, you're entitled to do so. So everyone's mask is down. You're talking happily. You are sharing food. You're grabbing food from one another. Look, let's be realistic, all right? If one of you has the coronavirus, the rest of you, well, your chances of getting are pretty high. And you multiply the effects across the community, and the question is whether it's worth it. So look, I know it's Father's Day this weekend. Okay, I know that we're all dying for the human contact. I know that we just want to see our friends, our loved ones. We want to be social. We want to be human. It's an essential part of the human experience. And I'm saying that's great. Go out there, interact, help yourself mentally and physically. But I'm just saying, be aware, be responsible, and help to save lives. Because I think at the end of the day, we are being asked to do the right thing. And I know it's a very uncool thing to say. I don't want to come across as preachy, but I think we are being asked to be mature, to be responsible. And I think we're being tested. And I hope that it is a test that we will pass, both on the individual level as well as a community. Okay, so these are my top 10 points. Okay, one more time. Number 10, social gatherings are not allowed. Number 9, eating out is allowed. Number 8, bring your IC everywhere you go. Number 7, unfortunately, entertainment venues are still closed. Number 6, sports facilities will reopen. Number 5, beauty services can resume. Number 4, work from home continues to be the default. Number 3, tuition and enrichment classes can resume. Number 2, shopping can resume, but expect long queues. And number 1, be safe. Now, I know that there is so much to cover and unpack. There are so many specific industries I haven't talked about. I haven't talked about, for example, property agents, property viewings, what can be done. I haven't talked about, for example, whether we are allowed to test drive cars from car showrooms, but we don't really have the time to go in depth for every single industry. But what I suggest is this, okay? Really go and look at the advisories for the specific task you want to do. And if you're not sure, feel free to look for me, and I'll be more than happy to discuss with you. So there are a couple more questions and points raised, okay? Tosh has asked, what is the best way to seek clarification from edge cases that are not illustrated in the advisories? Okay, that's a great question, okay? I don't have a very good answer. Okay, but I have some practical experience with that. Okay, so first of all, there is a MOH helpline, or rather a MOH hotline, okay, that you can call. They call it an emergency hotline, but when I call them up and I tell them, sorry, this is not emergency, should I be calling this hotline? They say, yeah, go ahead, okay? And you can call them for clarification. Okay, that's the starting point. But I think really, beyond seeking clarification from specific government bodies, again, to reiterate a theme, I think we are being told what is the underlying principle, and I think we're being asked to try and exercise our best judgment based on these underlying principles. I don't think this should be a case where we try to push the boundaries, push the envelopes, and ask self, can we do it this way? I think it's not against the rules, let's just whack. I mean, you can, but I think the idea is to be responsible and to think about the wider community. Alan said, I need a lot of disinfectant. Yeah, it's true. I mean, if I known, I would have invested in stocks of companies that sell disinfectants, and I would have sold stock in companies that specialize in certain grooming products, like shaving kits, for example. I suspect that Gillette sales have been down for this period. That's just my suspicion. Okay, I don't know about the guys here, but I only shave when I've got to do a video call or do something public facing like this, right? So that's the reality. Yeah, so I think this is more or less what I have for everyone today. Okay, and I think really at the end of the day, okay, I don't want to belabor the point, but most importantly, stay safe, take care of each other. I think make the most of this phase 2 to really reach out to the people that you want to reach out to and really try to help each other, because no matter how much we're struggling, I think there's definitely someone out there who's struggling more than us. I think this is really a chance for us to show what we're made of. I mean, I know it's a bit cheesy, but I think we can be better through this unfortunate experience. I think it's often said, never waste a good crisis. So since we've got to live through this crisis anyway, we might as well see what good can come out of it. So that's more or less it from me. You all been great. I'm very grateful for all the questions, all the comments, all the engagement. For those of you who followed the link on Facebook, you know how to look for me if you have any further queries or questions. For those of you who are here from my LinkedIn profile, you know how to reach out to me through LinkedIn as well. For those of you who are looking at this on YouTube, for example, my bio and all that will be on YouTube, so you can check it out. We've got one final question from Xian, okay, who is asking, so he says he likes my suit, thank you very much. And he asked whether I'm wearing shorts. And the answer is yes, actually. And I wasn't planning, well, sorry. He was asking whether I'm wearing shorts. And the answer is I'm actually wearing pants. And I can prove it, right? And the reason why I'm wearing pants and not shorts is precisely because my wife, Patrina, told me better put on a pair of pants. So there you have it, okay? So you all been great, okay? Take care, stay safe, be cool to each other, and until the next time, take care now.